Welcome, welcome, welcome. Listen, you're in for a treat today. I have got three amazing ladies here with me today, and we are going to talk about women of color. And this is an important topic for me. And it's something that I wanted to be able to do while during this month for me, because this month is my anniversary month for my podcast. And I wanted to be able to share and that's what I do for my podcast. I share the perspectives of women. Let me add in Tamika. Hey, Tamika. And so I wanted to do this so I could share the perspectives of other women of color with everything that we're dealing with today in this day and age, and for us to think for us to do a group think so that we can come up with some ideas and solutions to help us all move forward better, because we all have to coexist. So let's get started. I'm going to have each of you ladies to just go ahead and introduce yourselves. So we can start with Jessica.
Hi, here we go. Hi, thank you for having me. Hello. I am Jessica McLean. I am a life coach and a women's empowerment coach. And so my focus is helping women entrepreneurs, particularly women of color, power to the people, create wealth on the outside by creating wealth on the inside. So I'm all about holistic wealth, creating money, love, and happiness all at the same time. And the reason why I am so passionate about that, especially for women in our community, is because the revolution may not be televised, but it does need to be funded. And I truly believe that so much of our suffering in this country could be mitigated by economic success. And so if you think about like mass incarceration, how many people are in jail because they're poor? Not because we're Black, right? But because we're poor, right? And if we had the resources to be able to fight for ourselves and to fight for justice, we would be able to eliminate or at least significantly decrease recidivism, decrease incarceration. We will be able to fight unjust charges, right? Like these cops out here, like arresting our children, 6-year-olds getting arrested and stuff like that. There was a boy, I forget exactly how old he was, but literally his teachers called the police on him. It was ridiculous. And Jay-Z himself paid for his lawyers. You know how quickly that thing went away? Okay. So if we had that kind of power, that kind of economic power and influence, we wouldn't have to be afraid of bosses that don't treat us like we should be treated. We wouldn't have to be afraid, right, in different situations in the stores or in the, you know what I'm saying, in so many different situations when it comes to healthcare and all of these different situations, right? When it comes to just schooling and being able to, like, y'all, I'm gonna start preaching. Let me stop. But, but even just like having the economic access to education so that we can be the judges and we can be the juries and we can be the lawyers and we can be the doctors and we can be the hospital administrators and we can own the insurance companies and we can own the mortgage companies. So we don't have to be worried about all of the discrimination and the disparities, because heck, we're our own community. We're our own funders. We're our own people. Like, you know what I'm saying? We don't even have to go outside of our community to get what we need and to really thrive. So I'm all about thriving. So I help women create that thriving on the inside so that we can thrive on the outside so that the revolution can be funded. What's good? So that is me, y'all.
Yes, Jessica, I absolutely love that. Woo, I picked the right people for this. Awesome. I'm excited. Now, Sasha, if you will do me the honors, introduce yourself.
Absolutely. So I am Sasha. I am owner of Creations by Sasha. It is a lifestyle brand. I also have an online product shop, and I'm co-host of the Swirl and Sip podcast, where my co-host and I, who is an amazing Black woman like the ladies here, we talk about what it's like to be married, to have 2 little boys. Both of our sons are 2 years old, and what that all means to live in this country raising kids. And so we talk about everything under the sun, from like how to deal with our relationships and being in our marriages. Both of us have been with our significant others for a very long time, all the way to the fears that we have from raising little brown and black children. So, and for us, myself, is something that's very real. I know, Kimberly, you had me on here because of my particular situation where I'm obviously not a black woman, but I'm married to a black man, and he is a police officer. And so trying to navigate that world is interesting, because we have this situation where my son loves his daddy and loves that his daddy's a cop. He knows that his father's a police officer. He thinks it's amazing, but at some point, probably sooner than I would like to, I'm going to have to tell him that not all police officers are like his daddy. And so, and I myself, I'm a proud, very, very proud Puerto Rican woman. And so we're raising this little Afro-Latino boy, and I want him to be proud of both sides of us. And so I share all of that pretty much on my Instagram. Mainly is where you can find me. I talk about what it's like to be in this, interracial couple, raising our little biracial baby, and all the challenges and everything that comes along with that. So that's me.
Thank you so much, Sasha. I love it, love it, love it. Oh, I picked another great person. So, Tamika, great to have you. If you will introduce yourself.
Of course. Thank you again for having me as well. But my name is Tamika Bazil. I'm an Instagram brand strategist and marketing coach. I help people create effective marketing strategies for their brands on social media, predominantly using Instagram and Facebook. I know I met Kimberly in one of our shared Facebook groups, where we connected after I actually hosted a marketing diversity and marketing workshop, where we had almost 24 different entrepreneurs join in, and we pretty much had discussions around how Blackness has been affected by social media thus far. We talked about digital blackface. We talked about white entrepreneurs using language that is not inclusive, using African American vernacular English in order to start getting likes and shares, and really starting to get their views up. So the workshop was an incredible success. We had white entrepreneurs and entrepreneurs of color who were able to sit down and have really integral conversations about the online sector, and how that negatively creates a perception of Black culture, especially when you have white YouTubers and white content creators who are pretty much making their name and making money off of Black culture overall. So that is essentially how I met Kimberly. So yeah, I'm super excited to be here. I know that for me, a majority of my audience that I serve is Black women and people in the LGBT community, who we also know have intersections within the Black community as well. So I'm always incredibly humbled to be a part of conversations like this, and really give Black women and LGBT Black people just a voice in these conversations as well. So thank you so much for having me, Kimberly.
Yes. Oh, another great choice. I love it. You ladies are going to have great conversation today and bring about great insight, perspectives for people to take a look at. I just want them to hear something different. I know there's been a lot of finger pointing. There has been a lot of talk on both sides about things that women of color can do differently and things that white women can do differently. Well, you know what? Today, we simply want to stop the finger pointing. We want to move forward. We want to talk about what are some of the things that we can do to really move forward. So one of the first things I want you to talk about, and I know some of you, I think, Jessica, I don't know if you have children or not. I'm not sure. No, but I know Sasha does. And I know Tamika doesn't have any children. She told me that. But I know you've been around children, so you've seen it. Tell me, please tell me, and you can just take turns and jump in where you feel. Tell me, what have you seen? How has this affected our children? And Sasha will be able to tell us firsthand. But tell us how is all of this in the world today? Everything happening with women of color, people of color. How is all of this affecting our children today?
Yeah.
I mean,
if you already, sorry, go ahead, Sasha.
No worries. My son is he's only 2, so he's young enough where he doesn't understand what's going on. But for me as his mom, like when I found out I was pregnant, I got pregnant in 2017. And in 2016, when we got our current person in office, I immediately the next day called my husband and said, like, how are we supposed to have a family now? Like, how are we supposed to have a kid? Because this person he hates everything that our family stands for. Like, he's bashing Spanish people. He clearly doesn't care about Black people. He's not going to like us. Like, how do we bring a family into that? And so, when I got pregnant and then I found out I was having a son, one of the first things I was worried about was how do I raise a son where nothing will happen to him? And my husband, he's a police officer, but when he takes his badge off, he's a Black man. And that badge doesn't protect him when he takes that badge off. And like I said, having to one day have to tell my son, not every police officer is like daddy. They're not going to like you the same way that daddy does. They're not going to treat you the same way. Or even knowing that Black and brown children are perceived as being older when they're younger. So they're seen as more of a threat, or they're seen as, dangerous when they're like 5 or 6, as opposed to, white little boys and girls. They're still kids when they're 18 or 19, So I have all of that in my mind, but luckily he's still young enough where he doesn't have to experience that yet. I do worry about, though, there's an age where he will turn where he won't be cute anymore, and then he becomes a threat to people. And so that's something that's very real for me. But I think what's lucky for me is I live in Prince George's County, Maryland, which is right outside Washington, D.C. area. It's the wealthiest Black county in the country. And I love where I live because all around us in DC, all you see are Black people and people of color who are successful. So he will see that being the norm. And it won't be out of place for him, and the same thing with me and his father. He sees we live in a house, we live in the suburbs. He sees what success looks like, even though we are people of color. And so it won't be something that's foreign to him or something that he has to aspire to, because it's something that he will already be around and raised.
I love that. That was awesome, Sasha. And I'm really happy that you went first, because I actually recently have been looking into moving to PG County myself for the same reasons.
I am born and raised.
I love it. Yes, I love it. So a little bit of background on me. I'm originally from Brooklyn, New York. I currently live in South Jersey, also in a suburb, but a predominantly white area. So I love that Sasha mentioned that, because myself and my partner currently are starting to try and figure out, okay, like, we're going to end up buying a house soon. Where do we want to live? And one of those intentional decisions that we have made is looking into areas like PG County that are affluent, but based in Blackness. And that's for a few reasons. One, myself and my partner both being Black people, we want to ensure that when we do raise a family, that's one of the things that we take into consideration. As somebody who was born in and raised in the hood, I don't want my children to feel their Blackness is synonymous with a certain type of culture. And for me, that's always been a very, very big thing as well, is we need to look into communities where they're predominantly Black, but where we can feel safe, and where the school system is good, and where we can look outside and see other people like us, because there's always been a culture of, oh, when you leave the hood, you're leaving into whiteness, right? So like, you're leaving, and I was very comfortable growing up where I did. I grew up in a predominantly Caribbean area, and everybody looked like me growing up. So it wasn't until I left for college that I started really navigating spaces where whiteness was a predominant presence, and where I had to start policing myself and policing how I spoke and how I appeared, because I needed to be accepted into white spaces. So Kimberly, I love that you asked this question because I am the oldest of three. And although I don't have my own children quite yet, my brother turns 20 in September. And my sister turns 10 in August. So pretty much three different generations of children. They are both still in Brooklyn, New York, and I still spend a lot of time with them. But these are a lot of the conversations that we're starting to have with them as well. Is like our area, especially now with gentrification happening in Brooklyn, it is no longer the safe haven that I grew up in. It is no longer the space where everybody looked like me. When we were growing up, it wasn't a regular thing for police to patrol our areas, and not that our areas were unsafe because of it, but we essentially had each other's back. Like the area knew everybody who lived there. And now in 2020 Brooklyn, that's not necessarily the case. As more affluent white people start to move in, there's a bigger police presence because of it. And that's not to protect the people who are native to the neighborhood. That's to protect the people who are moving into the neighborhood, and who are starting to gentrify the neighborhood themselves. So now for me, I'm starting to see where my parents did not have to sit me down and talk to me about my Blackness. They didn't have to talk to me about how I would be perceived in school, or how my teachers would perceive me, or how other people would perceive me, because everybody that I was around was predominantly Black or Latino. And now with my brother and sister, that conversation has changed. Even though they are still being brought up in the same area that I was brought up in, now we have to teach them to be very diligent when they are out and about in Brooklyn. And this is Brooklyn, New York. Like, I don't know if any of you know Brooklyn in the 90s, but this is this is Brooklyn where like hip hop surfaced, and like this was such a place where our culture and our Blackness were so embedded into the roots of who we are. And now, although we haven't changed the spaces that we are frequenting, we have to change how we frequent them, because other people are starting to invade that space. So at least when it comes to how we start to talk to our children about these things, my brother is 20 years old. He reached a height of 6'3" when he was 14 years old. And to me, that's always going to be my little brother. I'm 7 years older than him. I've gone to every one of his parent teacher conferences. I remember when he graduated high school. I remember when he started college. Like, but now in the space where we always known to be home and we always knew to be safe, I need to teach him to be able to carry himself in a way that's not necessarily authentic to how I was brought up. So yeah, it really is. And as somebody who doesn't even currently live in that area, it's changing even my perception of how I see home and how I see comfort, because going back there is not necessarily familiar anymore. Now it is very much a place of where you have to be on high alert, and you have to recognize that I'm now coming into a space that is no longer centered around me and Black culture and Blackness anymore.
Jessica,
I just wanted to add
would you
really
like
quick.
to add anything?
I wanted to piggyback off of Tamika really quick, because one of my fears with my son, my husband's 6'3" as well. And my son at 2.5, he'll be 3 in October, is already 3 feet tall. Like, he's half of my height already. And so like what I was like going into what I was saying before, like you got these tall kids who, you know, oh, he's older. Like, why is he acting like that? He's supposed to be more mature. And I just know, like, because my husband had the same thing when he was growing up, you know, parent teacher conferences and all that stuff, because he's this tall kid. And so I worry about that all the time with my son.
Oh, yes.
Absolutely. Jessica, would you like to add anything?
I mean, I'm gonna let y'all have it. You know what I'm saying? Y'all said some powerful things. I do not have children myself. I was a teacher actually for almost a decade, which was an amazing experience. Kids are the best. And I feel like our responsibility as adults raising the children in our lives. There are children in my life. I have nieces, I have nephew. They're young and awesome. And I feel like, particularly in this climate, that I am more cognizant of intentionally affirming who they are. And that is something that, like, so my parents, even though I actually grew up in the suburbs surrounded by white people, that was my experience growing up. So being the only one all the time and people looking at you weird and all the different things that I could tell y'all stories. But um, so for me, actually going to college was the first time that I was able to be surrounded by peers who looked like me. And it was like the greatest thing that ever happened in my life, y'all. Oh my gosh. Anyway, but what I was saying really about the children in my family is just that, like, I am so aware of the importance and the necessity of affirming who they are. So like the other day, for example, my niece, I bought her this book called, like, I Love My Hair, I think, and there's a little girl on the front and she has her hair in braids and with the beads on the ends, and my niece goes, oh my gosh, auntie, she has hair just like mine. And on every page of the book, she's like, oh my gosh, look, she looks just like me. She looks just like me. And I was sitting there thinking, like, I had now one of these kind of books when I was growing up, and just like the importance of her knowing that and seeing that, especially because, like, in her school, there's not a lot of kids that look like her. Her teachers don't look like her. And just how important it is. And that's one thing, right? It's hair, right? But of course, hair is so deep in our culture, like you know, but it's so necessary for us to intentionally affirm our children's Blackness, because really, and I teach this to my clients that I'm working with now, which is a whole nother thing, but like, I've been doing some anti-racism education lately because there's been such a need for it. And one of the things that I've been teaching in all of my trainings and my book club and everything is just that racism is like poison in the water. It's like smog in the air, and we are all drinking it and we are all breathing it every single day. And so when white people breathe the air and they drink the water, the poison of racism and white supremacy teaches them that they are the sun and the universe revolves around them, that they should be the dominant race in every situation, in every conversation, and in every space, and anything that might threaten that dominance creates a violent or visceral reaction in them, which Robin DiAngelo named white fragility. And for us, because we are also breathing the same air, we're also drinking the same water, right? The process of detoxifying our own souls really means that we have to be intentionally affirming our own Blackness and intentionally affirming Blackness in our children. So making sure, like my parents did, that they're seeing examples of Black people who are successful in a lot of different ways. Like, I remember growing up, literally, like, how you have playing cards, right? You play war and you play Go Fish and you play spades and you play whatever. Our playing cards had pictures of Black faces on them. Like, I was like, my parents are so dope. Like literally, like, I'm playing like I Declare War with like Martin Luther King. I'm playing Rosa Parks. I'm playing Benjamin Banneker. Okay. And I'm playing George Washington Carver. What you got, right? And like, and that was literally like, that was my experience growing up. So my parents made sure that they affirmed our Blackness. I never danced ballet a day in my life, but I knew who Alvin Ailey was since I was like 6, And so, like, affirming who they are in every possible way, making sure that they're seeing examples of successful, intelligent, like, doing big things Black people. Of course, right? Financial literacy and financial education as early as possible. Your 5-year-olds can learn how to save, okay? like for real. So that's really, I won't go on all day, but that's really what I see as being a big part of our responsibility, in addition to teaching children to be aware of their safety and to recognize, like, the impact of the white gaze on their lives. We also have to make sure that we are affirming them from the inside so they understand, right? That who they are, that they understand, right? That their blood has gold in it. You know what I'm saying? Like, so they understand that they're descendants of royalty and that who they are is really just like gold dust and wielders of melanated magic. Like they need to understand that. And so us teaching them that is where the power truly is. And that power is really what will allow them to activate themselves in the specific ways that they are called to fight for justice, right? Because each of us has our own sort of anti-racist our own part to play, right, in the fight to dismantle the systems of racism that have oppressed us for 560 years. And everybody's piece of the puzzle is a little bit different. So you have the people that are boots on the ground, protesting, fists in the air, like fight the power, right? Like we need everybody who's doing that to continue doing that. And we have the people that are organizing, and we have the people that are funding the protests, right? So you got the people that are protesting and the people that are feeding them. You know what I'm saying? Like you got the people that are working on economics, you got the people that are working on healthcare, you got the people that are working in education, in social work, right? In banking, in mortgage, in all of these different areas, right? There are so many different, everybody's got their own part to play. We've got the musicians and the artists, like everybody's got their own little piece of it. And so when we teach our children to know who they are and know what that means and to really understand the greatness that is on the inside of them, we empower them to not just fear for their safety or be aware of what may happen to them as a result of the system in which we live, but also to empower themselves to fight for justice in their specific way so that we can take this mother down. So yeah, that's me, girl. That's me. That's what I got.
Beautiful. I loved it. I loved it. Piggybacking a little bit off of Jessica, I love that you mentioned because my boyfriend also was raised in the suburbs, and we often talk a lot about like just the discrepancies, small things that I truly grew up believing were fake. Things like having lockers in your school. Things that I truly grew up seeing on TV that I was convinced were just kind of like TV magic. And then leaving where I came from and leaving Brooklyn and realizing like, no, like our school was built this way because we don't have space and we don't have economic funding. We don't have educational funding. We don't have the same opportunities that the kids in the suburbs do, and that it's not fake and it's not movie magic. It is a reality for a large part of America. But those inner city kids just don't get the same access. So I think it's super important, at least for us, especially as Black women, to who come from these different areas of America, because I think our Blackness it's not monolithic, right? It's an experience in itself that is shaped from our own different experiences and our Blackness and what contributes to our own culture. And so like I love being able to hear from other Black people what their experiences were like, because for me as a woman who grew up in the inner city, and now I'm very proud and humbled to say I have 2 degrees, I have my own business, like I have done a lot with my time. But that took a lot of learning and a lot of like, oh, so this is not how this works out, like out here in the big world. So this is how I should speak. And something that my boyfriend and I are constantly talking about was like, there was a lot of cultural shock when I got my first full-time position. And I realized just how much power the white man had in professional spaces. And how they dictate what professionalism means, from our hair to the way we speak, to the way we dress. And that was a really big slap in the face, because growing up, my teachers had dreadlocks. And and I had a predominant amount of my teachers were Latino and Latina. So like for me, I was like, that's just, how is the rest of the world not functioning this way? So I really love hearing your point of view, Jessica, because that's always such an important thing for me.
See, I kind of grew up in the middle of both of you, because I'm not Black, but I grew up in a Black county. I was only the only Spanish person, like pretty much it's me and like 2 other people growing up. It was just but I always tell the story. I had a friend who grew up, literally went to elementary, middle, and high school together. We actually work at the same job now. And she's Puerto Rican, just the same way I am. And our schools were always predominantly Black, but had a fair amount of white people. And then it was us as the 2 Latinas. And you could see that, like, we always talk about this nature versus nurture. Like, we got to a point in schooling where we had to pick a side, right? Like, culturally, where do we fit in? Because we're not in a predominantly Hispanic place and we love our culture at home, but where do we fit in socially? And she went the white side and I went the black side. And so like, she married a white man. She went to a predominantly white school, whereas I went to two HBCUs. And so I've always been surrounded by Black people. I've always felt most comfortable around Black people and Black culture, while still being very proud of my, Puerto Ricanness. But I obviously married a Black man, and so like it's interesting because my experience has always been of othering, where I know I'm not Black, and I actually had this experience in college where I was I remember like sitting in my car crying, telling my boyfriend, who is now my husband, like, I don't belong here because I don't like fit in. Like, I'm not a Black person, but I'm not a white person, because that's all there was. It's either you're Black or you're white. And so I'm not either of those. And I got over it, and now I'm fine with it, but it's always been the othering of it. And I think that somewhat helped me too, though, because like what you were saying, code switching. Like, I've always known how to code switch. And so I work in a predominantly white place. We all can put on our quote unquote Becky voice real quick. And so I've never had that problem. And it wasn't actually until recently that I like figured out that only people of color have to code switch. It never occurred to me that people who aren't of color don't have to do that. Like, they just have one voice. And
that's really crazy. Or that they show up to work every day and they're 100% natural demeanor. Like, and that's wild to me. Like, because
I'm a very different person at work than I am outside of work. 4 o'clock comes around and it's a completely different person. And I let some of that show. I don't know if you guys can see my nails. These aren't, the typical,
you already know, girl. I love my nails.
I got my hoops on. So like, I let parts of that come out, but, I can still answer the phone and I can still be very, professional and put on that type of voice. So I think my experience, I grew up in the suburbs. I grew up in this wealthy Black county where I'm surrounded by Black excellence and Black people doing good things, and knowing that I related more to that culture while still feeling like different, but still being able to like kind of navigate pretty much all sides of what we need to navigate as people of color.
Y'all both got me so jealous. That was all I wanted growing up. Like, where are my people at? This is the worst. I've had one Black teacher in my whole life. Tell me why I took a Black power class in college and my teacher was still white. I was my only Black teacher I've ever had in my whole life was my college dance teacher. I wasn't even a dance major. I took dance for no reason.
And see, I couldn't imagine not growing up the way that I did. And like, if I were to grow up in New York, my family's actually from New York. And so I can imagine being raised like that, where I'm very much on the Puerto Rican side of myself and knowing all of that. But then I can't imagine, because of how much I am immersed in Black culture and how much I love Black culture, like, to not see that on a daily basis and be surrounded by that. I feel really bad for you, Jessica.
It's mad painful. Okay, it is.
Okay, we're here for you now, girl. You can learn everything you need to now. That's all that matters.
I love it. I love this conversation. So, and it sounds like all of the women here, women of color, you agree that at this point, we need to be aggressive in taking responsibility for our children's Blackness. We need to be able to educate them well on how to conduct themselves in public, how to just embrace their Blackness, but still be able to be professional, and just to have a good understanding of what's happening in society today. Because as much as we, I have friends that I've had conversation with and they don't want to admit it, but we as Black women or women of color, period, we just have to act differently. these corporate environments. We do have to. And so just being able to educate our children, not that we are teaching them to hide their Blackness. I want to make that point. We're not doing that. But we need to take the responsibility to be able to educate them. So let me ask this question. And if you guys could, if you ladies could weigh in on this. Jessica made a point of living in this place where she was in the suburbs, and Tamika was in this place where all the women, all the people looked like her. And then Sasha's kind of in the middle. I'm wondering, how dangerous is it for our children to live in a place where everyone looks like you, everyone behaves like you, and then have to go out into the world and see the different people and cultures and not really be prepared for it?
I can jump on this one. I think that really what we have to teach them is the same thing we had to learn, which is how to be bilingual, right? Like, I speak 3 languages. I speak English, I speak Spanish, and I speak Black. And I just get to pick, you know what I'm saying, which one I'm using in which situation. Because really, like, everybody to a degree grows up in an area where everyone is to a degree like them, because you become like the culture that you grow up in. So like, if you, for example, Sasha, if you grew up in Puerto Rico and then you moved to New York City, you would have a different experience, right? Like, you'd be like, oh wow, where am I right now, right? It's a whole thing. And even like me growing up in the suburbs and then moving to St. Louis was a different experience. And then being at a school where I had the opportunity to be surrounded by other Black students was a different experience. It was a new experience for me. And now I live in Florida, and that's a whole different experience, right? Like, I live in Miami. So like, I go to the grocery store and people are like, hey, mommy. And I'm like, oh, okay. That's what we're doing now. Like, you know what I mean? But like, it's cool with me, right? Like, personally, I love it. You know, I love it. I'm like, yes, I'm Cuban too. It's fine. You know, but like, we have to learn really to be bilingual, like you said, to be Black and also professional, or like Black but professional. Like, well, we just have to speak both languages, right? Because professionalism isn't really professionalism, because professionalism doesn't really mean anything. You know, especially if you're in the entrepreneurial world, right? Like, you could be, I mean, I see, you know, entrepreneurs that are making hundreds of thousands of dollars a year that post Instagram pictures of themselves with no clothes on and a hot. So like, what does professional even mean at this point in history, right? But like, what does it mean to function and to move in the culture of your family and your heritage and your community, right? And then what does it mean to function and to move and to speak the language of your employers and the people that are signing your checks? Like, what does that look like? You know what I'm saying? And it's going to look different if you're an entrepreneur than it does if you're a person with a job, right? If you are an employee. So what does it look like to move in those different situations and those different scenarios and those different cultures and those different environments? And the same way that like I learned a second language, right? The same way that I learned how to talk Black, and which was new for me because I grew up in the suburbs, right? So I learned how to talk white before I learned how to talk Black, right? And then I learned how to speak Spanish after that, right? But like, it's just learning really to navigate different situations. And I think that is something that people are learning all the time. And so we just get to help them understand what it looks like and what that means, right?
Yeah. I love that you mentioned that, Jessica. So I actually am not full-time in my business just yet. I still work in higher education. So I work at a mid-sized public institution in South Jersey. So you can just imagine the type of white people that we attract here. And I really want to add, especially piggybacking off of Jessica's point, white kids do that every day. They grow up in spaces where they don't see any people of color. Okay. They grow up in spaces where everybody looks like them. They come from middle America. They come from everywhere, and they go to college anywhere. And there's not a person on this planet that tells them they need to assimilate. They are never taught assimilation. They come to these institutions and they bulldoze through everything because they have an expectation as to what they are owed. So when it comes to talking about our need to assimilate, I recognize that as people of color, assimilation is a responsibility that's only on us. It is never on our white counterparts. So I also want to add that I do student discipline. So I'm responsible for expelling students from the university. So you can imagine how intense that can get, especially with white parents who believe that their kids are God's gift to this planet, and the amount of privilege that comes from being a woman of color who stands in between you and your degree, and the amount of privilege that they have to say, no, this is what's owed to me. Like, I came to this institution with the expectation that I was going to get this degree no matter what I do, no matter what I contribute to this community, no matter how I show up. This degree is owed to me because I decided to pay the money and I'm going to get it. Whereas for our Black children, it is financial aid. It is paying off the balance. God knows how, but we do it every time. It is learning to speak their language. It is adopting Eurocentric amounts of professionalism, because I also want to add that our professional expectations are based on a European expectation as to how we look. That's why Black women started relaxing their hair. That's why like when I started applying for jobs, I am somebody who don't mind my quarantine look right now. My head wrap is very much quarantine style, but but I had to really decide for myself whether or not I was gonna interview for these jobs with my braids in, because I love me some good long box braids. I'm also natural as well. And trying to figure out how you're going to show up just to get a job, knowing that I have the same degrees as my white counterparts. I have done the same, likely more work than my white counterparts, and still I can show up with braids and somebody tell me that it's not professional and that I don't deserve to be where I am. So the whole concept of assimilating for me is it's hard and it's touchy, because there is a big part of me as a Black woman who knows that I grew up in the inner city. There's a part of me that has felt very attached to my Blackness, and the way I speak and the way I show up and my head wraps and my hoops. And there's a part of me that very much forces that on my white area, because I do live in a white area. And there's a part of me that shows up to work every day and I'm like, look, like, I'm uncomfortable wearing the hoops right now. I am. Like, I know that when I look at my coworkers, the first thing they're going to notice is the hoops, but I have to wear it. I have to wear the head wrap. I have to put the nails on. I have to show up, because for me, I'm like, I am one of two Black people that I really am around at this university. And for me, I find that a lot of Black women do this. We put it on our shoulders. We're like, you know what? This is going to be my job. So yeah, I love that you mentioned that, Jessica, because I'm like, every day I show up to work and every day I am ready to have the tough conversations with students. And every day there is a white student that shows up, and regardless of what they were documented for, regardless of what the situation is that we're discussing, there is an air of, I deserve to be here because I am paying you to be here. You don't pay me to be here. The state of New Jersey pays me to be here. This degree is a privilege. We don't owe you this degree because your daddy signed this check and you could pay for it. And that is a narrative that we can never tell to our children, because we teach them to assimilate and we teach them to appreciate where they get to in life. And we teach them to appreciate their education and we teach them to appreciate their space in the world. And a lot of that is just so hard. Like, it really is.
I think for me, growing up the way that I did, I would rather my son grow up and be comfortable in his Blackness, because I think the world's going to perceive him as a Black man. He's a little bit more caramel than I am, but he still clearly looks mixed. But I think he'll just be seen as a Black man, especially growing up where he is. All his friends are going to be little Black boys, and so I think he's just going to be seen that way. I would rather him be comfortable in his Blackness and own that than what I think maybe what Jessica might have gone through is being raised around all white people and questioning what your worth is because of how all of those white people see you. Like, I'd rather teach him that, okay, when you go get a job, you might have to talk a little different. You might have to do things a little different, but at the same time, be comfortable with who you are and what you are. Like, I come in with my hoops at my job, and I come in with my nails, and people can look at me, and I'm fine with it because I'm comfortable in how I express my culture, and I want him to be the same way. And like, the added thing with my son, my son's name is Stokely, and he is named after Stokely Carmichael, So no matter what space he goes into, like they'll know exactly what him and his
That
parents
is so cute, y'all.
like when we named him, like I get a lot of questions. I always think it's hilarious because every black person, for the most part, they're like, "Oh yeah, like so Carmichael, Black Power movement, like all of that stuff." A couple of them think, "Oh, like mint condition." We're like, "No, not that." Every white person is like, "Oh, is that a family name?" And I'm like, "No, he's named after Stokely Carmichael, you know, founder of the Black Power movement." And you can just see it. They're just like, "Oh, like." That's why would you, and they don't ask, but you can see it in their face, like why would you choose to name your son that like that? And I want my son is a powerful name, I think, and I think when he goes into spaces that he'll get that question every time, and he can say, "This is who I'm named after," and I'm proud of it. And you know, I want him to be comfortable walking into spaces in his blackness, in his Puerto Ricanness, and not have to apologize for it. And I think to kind of change a little bit of what you were saying, Kim, you know, professionalism and to piggyback of what were you saying to me, professionalism is defined by white people, but that doesn't make it professional. Like just because you have the hoops and the head wrap and the nails doesn't mean that you're less professional. If anything, I would argue that people of color, like, you know, we have to be more professional and more educated because we're navigating these two different worlds. Like we don't have to, you know, we don't get the privilege of just walking into a space and being ourselves. We got to focus on who's in the room and what are we trying to do and what's our goal here. And, you know, all of that takes a higher level, in my opinion, you know, a different type of education and learning than some white people will experience. And so I don't want my child to feel othered. I want him to be comfortable in who he is. And I'd rather he grow up being surrounded by that and us educating him about the other world than him having to question his worth because he's having people at school tell him that they don't like his skin color or his hair is too curly and you know why do you look that way.
I love that. And you know, I love the fact that all three of you ladies talked about how assimilation is a responsibility. It is a responsibility for us to bear. It's an unfortunate responsibility. Let me be clear on that. But still, it's one that it is for us to bear in order to help our children to understand and educate how to live in this society safely, respectfully. It's our burden to bear. Um, Question for the you. How there's an obvious communication gap that exists between us as women of color and white women. How do we work to bridge that communication gap?
I'm going to be the first person to say that that's a heavy question, and I have struggled. Okay, I'm going to be very honest. I know that I met Kim when I did. Yeah, I that has been a very much a learning process for me, and it's one that I'm committed to really understanding for myself, like where my place is. I know when I met Kim, I was fresh off of my diversity workshop, which attracted a very large amount of white women. So it for me was the first time that I was able to pretty much have the floor and it be predominantly like white people. I don't know if that makes sense, but like for me to speak or to teach about something to a predominantly white space, that was my first time. So there was a lot of stuff that came up, right? There was a lot of stuff for me when I was preparing for this workshop. I knew that I had to talk about a lot of really touchy things, and they're touchy not only to white people, but to me as well as a person of color, and as a Black woman. And I pretty much made the decision to not change my language and to be comfortable in speaking African American vernacular English, and to be comfortable in showing up because y'all are here to learn from me. A Black woman is standing at the podium right now. So if I have the spot at the podium, I'm going to take that spot however I deserve to take it, rather than try to shift how I speak or how I present this information to make you comfortable because you are the learner. Um, so that was very much my first time really being able to engage with white women in that way. And at least the people that came to the workshop, they were very comfortable with the way I addressed them. They were very comfortable in the conversations that we had. And from the jump and from the beginning of the workshop, I made it clear, like, look, there are going to be some things here that you're unfamiliar with. You need to be open to learning new terminology. You need to be open to unlearning what you think you know. And that was an incredible experience. And I guess on the professional side of what I do in higher education, the conversations haven't been so open. And I don't really know what the difference is because in my professional life, outside of being an entrepreneur, I have a master's degree. Like I have done everything that white America has told us to do. And still there is a little bit of a barrier between myself and my white counterparts. I have had issues where like the white woman tears, that's something that I encounter all the time. It's Tamika doesn't like me. Tamika has a bad attitude. Tamika this. And it's like, no, I'm going to hold you accountable because that's what makes us better people and better coworkers overall. And I just find that, at least from my experience, that when I work with white women, it is harder to separate their emotions from their work life, especially when it's coming from a Black person. They feel we're more aggressive. They feel we're more like, even if you're doing something that I would consider very regular, giving you a direction, giving you something to do, it's hard to communicate with people who already see you as one giant attitude. So I think that that's someplace that I'm still learning. But my experience as an entrepreneur and navigating that space around white people, I find that I'm way more respected as an entrepreneur because I've already placed myself at the podium. So like I already have my online presence. My presence says this is what I am. This is my expertise. So when you step to me, you already know that this is what you can come and step to me about. You already know that this is the area that I dominate at. And I find that a lot of the time my white counterparts respect that in comparison to being in spaces where I am another face in everybody that they're navigating with. It's easier for them to kind of see me as, I guess, just another Black woman. And the communication is a lot harder there. So yeah.
I think like what you were saying in my Instagram space, I'm 100% authentically me. And so if you have questions, just you'll know that you're going to get some sort of response, like the right way. I think, but when it comes to navigating white women in general, honestly, like there's very few places where I do it because unless it's someone who I know or someone who has a genuine interest in actually like doing the work that it takes to unpack all of your prejudice and your bias and all the things that you don't even know that you do, I have no interest in doing it. Because I don't think it's for me to have to like make them feel comfortable with who I am. And so I've had some conversations with some white counterparts of mine where I've been very upfront, like these are the things that I experienced, these are the things that my husband experienced, and it opens their eyes, and I'm like, these are the things that you do that not you specifically, but white people specifically do that are microaggressions and things like that. And so I have no problem educating people who want to be educated, but I have like I would put a little jar of white tears on my desk if I had to interact with people like that, because I just don't have the patience for it. Like I think the older I've gotten, I've been very much this is who I am, and either you're gonna take it or you're not. And I've already been told I have a resting bee face, and so if that makes you uncomfortable, I don't know what to do with that. But if they're not willing to learn, if they immediately turn on the tears, if they feel attacked by being told what genuine life experiences are, then I don't have interest in moving that conversation forward. Because I think until they are able to recognize and take that information and know that it's not specifically an attack on them, that, and that we're not, saying this is your fault, like this is what you're doing, and that we're saying, this is our experience and you need to recognize where you fall into that. Unless they are at that place, then I think nothing I say is going to help get them any further.
I love that, Sasha. And I think it's funny too, at least for me. And thank you, Kimberly, for this question. I don't get the same experiences with white men, right? Like white men let me challenge them. I openly challenge white men. And I find that the reaction is like, yeah, like, I mean, I don't think any white man enjoys being challenged, but I think that they get it so, like, where they get it from is so very specific that like that when you challenge them, it's a little bit more of a, oh, okay, so tell me why you think that, and like, like it's not comfortable, definitely not, but the reaction is slightly different in comparison to white women who all of a sudden kind of become a shell of themselves and now they feel attacked, and it's like this, like, oh, like now I need a bubble around me. Whereas in comparison to white men, like I've been in meetings and sat across the table from white men and I've been like, explain to me your logic here because it's not settling. And they will offer explanation and commentary, whereas with white men, and I find that it's harder to challenge them without there being some sort of, like, I guess, emotional backlash from it. And I guess that also goes along with the narrative of Black women, right? And of women of color being more aggressive and more closer to manly to them. And I can't help but coming, like, to everything that happens with us socially, I can't help coming back to this place of it's from the original narratives that were placed on us societally during times of segregation, from slavery to segregation to Jim Crow. Those narratives continue to paint a picture of what we look like in the workplace, in social atmospheres, which is why it makes so much of our communication so difficult. So yeah.
Yeah, Tamika, that is why I specifically asked the question about white women, simply because I know it's different. White men are not, they're more open to accepting that. They don't have emotional breakdowns. They will have a logical conversation with you and not feel attacked. And so that's why I specifically asked the question. Jessica, do you want to weigh in?
So, so I am actually currently running a book club specifically for white women called Read Books and Save Lives. That's the name of it. And we are actually currently reading the book Me and White Supremacy by Layla Saad. And it's amazing. And it's amazing partly because of all the things that I'm learning. Like, she's giving so much language to things that I didn't realize, like I didn't have names for, which has been really interesting. Like, so I'm getting some insight into myself and the way that I process, but also it has given me a lot of language to describe and understand the things that you guys are talking about. So far you've discussed white fragility, white superiority, white centering, anti-Blackness, and a whole lot of other things. And I'm like, oh, look, I've got all the language now, right? I've got all the language now. It's amazing. And honestly, I will say that I actually enjoy having the conversations with white women in this particular space, partly because, right, I'm the person doing the teaching, which helps a lot. So I'm allowing the text and the information to challenge them, but it's a group of women that are willing to look at themselves in a way that they never have before. And I will also say that something that has really been powerful for me in all of my conversations with white people since really diving into this over the past month has been that, like, helping white people understand the difference between fault and responsibility. Because one of the things that kicks up white fragility, specifically when we're talking about racism, is the idea that, like, it's not my fault. It's not my fault. It's not my fault, right? Like I didn't own slaves. I'm not intentionally mean to Black people when I see them walking down the street or at my job or whatever. So like, this is not my fault. I'm not racist. I'm not a bad person, right? And so like, I have been able to now, one of the things that I teach them is that racism is not your fault. Racism was invented by Prince Henry in 1440, and it was invented completely out of thin air by his biographer, and it was invented for the purpose of advancing, for the purpose of justifying slavery. And the purpose of slavery was to advance capitalism and self-interest. So literally, this was a guy who was like, I'm all about me, and I also want to make a lot of money. How can I do it? Oh, I know, I can exploit other people. Great, which people? I'm gonna choose Black people. That sounds good. And then I'm gonna make up reasons why what I'm doing is okay. And that is how racism came to be. It was literally like his biographer, and then later on, the biologist Carl von Linnaeus, who invented the system that we use to classify and the taxonomic system that we use to classify living organisms. He decided that he could use the same classification system that he uses to classify animals to classify human beings. And so he was like, okay, so he invented Homo asiaticus and Homo europaeus and Homo afer and Homo americanus. And then he created like a ladder hierarchy and invented traits that he assigned to each group of people. And then everyone said, well, he's a scientist. This must be science. Okay. And so this is 1770, you guys, right? And so like it started in 1440, reconfirmed in 1770 through imaginary science and a few other people that said things like white people have more beautiful skulls and therefore they're better than us, as the like things that just make no sense. But like, so this whole confirmation bias and imaginary science thing was invented hundreds of years ago. And so I actually tell this to white people and I say that you didn't invent racism. It was not created by you. Therefore, it is not your fault. You were born into a system of white supremacy, a system of racism that benefits you and harms other people on a daily basis. And so you didn't create this. It's not your fault. Honestly, you had no idea that it was happening. White privilege was intended and designed to be invisible to you. Peggy McIntosh, the woman who actually coined the term white privilege, she herself called it the invisible knapsack because she said we're carrying around all these advantages and benefits we don't even know we have, right? In fact, if you read her document where she talks about the invisible knapsack, she says at the end of it, these things are so invisible to me, I kept forgetting about them while I was writing about them. Like that's how invisible white privilege is to white people. And it was supposed to be, right? Like that's the way that it was set up and designed. And so I tell them, you know, you didn't invent racism. You didn't invent all of these things, white supremacy, white privilege. Like you didn't create these things. But now that you're aware that you have them, it is your responsibility to do something with the information. And doing something with the information means you taking intentional action every day to make choices that are going to make sure that the next person doesn't end up like George Floyd. That is what this is about. It is not about you and it's not about your feelings. So don't sit in guilt and don't sit in shame, because guilt and shame are self-centering emotions and they are paralyzing emotions. So if you sit and you feel guilty all day, like honestly, Black people, we don't need y'all to feel bad. I don't need you to feel bad. If we're talking about racism, if we're talking about white privilege, like I'm not telling you these things because I want you to sit there and feel bad. Not feeling bad does nothing for me. It does nothing for my children. I don't have children, but you know what I'm saying, right? It does nothing for my family. It does nothing for my nieces. It does nothing for my nephew. It does nothing for George Floyd's family. It does nothing for Trayvon Martin's mother. Like, okay, like I don't need you to feel bad. I don't need you to feel guilt. I don't need you to feel shame. Like, go ahead and feel them, because doggone it, it is shameful to find out that your ancestors owned slaves, or to find out that you are complicit in a system that kills people on a regular basis, right? Yes, feel sad. You need to feel the guilt and you need to feel the shame, because you are rehumanizing yourself. Because if you think about how dehumanizing it is for you to grow up breathing the smog and drinking poison that has taught you not to care about other people's experiences and not to care that people are dying every day. because of a system within which you are complicit, and a system that benefits you to their detriment, to not care about that, for your heart not to be torn in two when you see that happening. Yeah, the white supremacy is dehumanizing you too. It's dehumanizing you too. And so I communicate that, I teach that to them, and I say, so this is really about you rehumanizing yourself, and then saying, okay, I'm going to be a person that is out here doing the work that will save the next person's life. And that's what it's about. And to be able to have those conversations, honestly, I enjoy them because there's so much power and beauty.
Yes.
You know?
I'm gonna need a link to that book club, girl, because
girl, yes.
yeah, like
yes.
my
Definitely.
goodness, that was
Jessica,
powerful.
you're gonna have to share that link. Yeah, you're gonna have to share that link.
Absolutely.
And Jessica, that was all beautifully said. I want you to know that, because of the simple fact that a good place to start with that communication is helping white women to understand the difference between fault and responsibility.
Yep.
I really like that, where that went, because it brings them back to their base level emotions, because at the end of the day, we're all humans. And we should have some level of humanity about ourselves that puts us in a place to care that these horrible things are happening in the world today. At the base level, when you turn away and you don't care, you need to check yourself, because you may have lost your humanity. There are pieces of your humanity that's being chipped away. So that was a very, very good point. Now, I can't leave today without asking Sasha this question. I'm going to ask Sasha. Sasha, if you give me a couple minutes of answer to this, and then I've got one last question for you ladies. Your husband, of course, is a police officer. And I hate to put you on the spot about what is happening with him and what he is thinking about all of this that's happening. And I don't want you to necessarily speak for him, but you live with him. So,
my husband and I actually don't talk much about what goes on, because I know his stance on it. He thankfully works for a police agency that doesn't have as many problems as some of these other police forces. It's a city agency. I mean, he works for DC police, so it's a little bit different than if you're working for some of these other areas. DC itself is a very transient city. It's predominantly Black city. I mean, they call it Chocolate City for a reason. So like the people who live there look like him most of the time. He does have people who they support our president, and they're big Second Amendment right people. And they would probably tell him that he's not like them, like those other people that they have to arrest all the time. I think he has to walk a fine line, because he is a Black man, but when he has that badge on, these are the same people that he has to be able to depend on. Like if something were to happen, they have to be able, like he has to trust that they're gonna go in for his life, the same way he would for theirs. And so I think he does walk this fine line with that. But he's still Black, and so I think he thinks a lot of this stuff should be happening. I think they tore down a statue the other day, and he was mad because he had to work there. He said there was a double standard because the people who were pulling it down were white, and he said had they been pulling it down and they were Black, it would have been a different situation. But he wasn't mad that they pulled it down, because it was like somebody who owned slaves. So he's not gonna get mad at that. So and he'll tell, he's more of the cop who will go into the communities where he works, and they know who he is. They know he's the cop. He doesn't really press them out for minor things. Like I'm not gonna worry about if you have weed or something like that, because that's not really that important. He tries to build that trust, because those same people he gives passes to or gives breaks on, if something does happen, they might be more willing to answer his questions or to help him out. So I think, he, at the end of the day, and, his family, his whole family actually are law enforcement. My sister-in-law, my brother-in-law, my mother-in-law is a retired police officer. Like they all come from that. And I think if because of this, they want to change the system, and one of the ways of doing that is to change it from the inside. I personally think that if there were more officers of color, and there were more people who come from the communities that they police, because that's the bigger problem, is that you have a lot of these people, even in DC, where a lot of people live in Pennsylvania, or they might live in Jersey or Delaware, and they come into DC every day to police. They don't know the community that they're policing. And so I think a lot of this would change if officers were one more of color, and that they came from the communities that they were policing. But I think his family and his way is like, I want to change things, and part of that is, some people have to be within the system in order to change it.
Thank you for that, Sasha. Those were really good suggestions. And let your husband know that we are continually praying for you and your family, because regardless to the fact that he is in his community, he is still in a very high profile, dangerous job. And so we want him to know that we are always praying for you and your family, and what he does. And, I really want to be able to say publicly that all police officers are not bad. Unlike what people, a lot of times I've had conversation with people who they say, you all think that all police officers are bad. And I say, you can't say that, because you can't say what we all think, because you're not we all. And secondly, we are all, although we may be people of color, we're still individuals. We have our own minds. We're not like a single unit band or something. I may think differently than Jessica, than Tamika, than Sasha, so please know that we understand that at the end of the day, police officers are humans too. It is the ones that have lost their humanity that create the problem. It has nothing to do, it's just simply the ones that have lost their humanity. And then they begin to treat people like animals. And that is
I'll say to that, my husband will say that there's a lot of people who are police officers that have no business being police officers. They come from complexes where they were either bullied in school, and or they were the bully, and therefore they power trip. But they have no business being cops. And so, because at the end of the day, originally speaking, police officers were never for people of color, right? They were supposed to be to rein them in and protect white people. That's what it was for. But now, the narrative of that is changed. They're supposed to be who you call to protect you and things like that. Unfortunately, the situations that a lot of cities have gotten into is that police are now supposed to be for everything, right? Like mental health, like domestic violence, things like that, were situations they were never supposed to be involved in. But he will tell you straight up, there are tons of people who have no business wearing a badge, and that they do so because and he'll, like, a lot of shootings that he's seen, and, things on TV, like, it's all a power trip, people who got scared when they had no business being scared. A lot of people also have to recognize, and I'll say this, as a wife of a police officer, people have a natural flight or fight reaction, right? And police officers are trained to run into situations that normal people would run out of. If they are not constantly trained in that, then that goes away. Like, your natural reaction is to protect yourself. And so, but what these situations are happening is that people are saying they're afraid of things, or that they're legitimately scared in situations they don't need to be. And that's because of the whole othering of Blackness, and the perceived threat of Black people as a culture, and aggressiveness that comes from Black men and women. But I think, like I said, me personally, if more people of color, instead of like, oh, why would I want to be a cop? Like that, that job's not for me, that all police officers are bad, it's a bad system. I think if more people of color decided to become police officers and really work within these communities, then people who are being policed by those people would start to view police officers different, because they would look at somebody like a Black police officer and say, he gets it. Like, because I know when he takes his uniform off, he's still just like me.
love that. I absolutely love that. And you're absolutely right about that, Sasha. Nicely said. Now, ladies, we're going. This has been so good. Oh my gosh, you ladies are so brilliant. Oh, hats off to you. I love it. I want each of you to take a couple minutes and answer this question for me. What are your suggestions for moving forward? How do we how do we grow and become better from all of this? And one of the hashtags that I've created just for this is hashtag we refuse to be forgotten. This is not going to be a conversation for now, and then 2 months from now, we're forgotten. We refuse to be forgotten. This is an ongoing conversation. So, ladies, what are your suggestions for moving forward? How do we grow and become better from this?
I think I'm gonna go first. So I am actually very proud of where we are right now. We are amidst a revolution, and I have to be honest in saying that I would have never thought that I would have been able to live to see history being made in this way. As a millennial, we have seen a lot in our lifetimes, but I am very hopeful for where this current revolution will take our country. I am a firm believer that revolutions they're never not violent. They're never not destructive, because when it comes to human rights, you're going to need to lose your comfort in order for us to be able to gain the rights that we deserve. So I'm very proud to be a Black person in America right now. I think that moving forward, it's hard. It's hard to say what should come next. I know I'm super proud of Jessica for sitting down and having the conversations that she's having within her book club. I think that is absolutely amazing. I as a Black woman am, like Jessica, am committed to being able to have those tough conversations with white people, but I also don't believe that Black people should be taking the responsibility of educating white people anymore. I think that the books and the opportunities that Jessica is putting in front of them have always been put in front of them. And at this point, we need to hold them accountable for no longer being willfully ignorant, and allowing themselves to sit within their privilege and act like the things that are happening are not happening. So I think that is going to be a really big thing. But I do think that as Black people, and I'm just going to talk about the Black community and not the entire people of color community, because I do think that right now this is a Black revolution. I think that as Black people, what we really need to do is really start stepping outside of ourselves, and recognizing whether you are a Black person in the suburbs, a Black person in the inner city. This revolution is standing for us all. And I think my part of it is embracing my Blackness in every aspect of my life now. So I have made a commitment to myself to no longer code switch at work. I have made a commitment to myself to show up in my hoops and to show up with my nails done, and to still give the value that I give, and to embrace my Blackness 100%, because you will be uncomfortable until you are comfortable with it. And I think that, and I'm not a frontliner, I'm not on the front lines of the marches and things of that nature, but that for me is just my march. That is my part of the revolution. So yeah, that's all I can give.
I love it, sis. I love that you're wearing your hoops for the culture. And I just appreciate so much that every day you go to work in those earrings for me. That is your gift to me, and I receive it individually. Thank you. I do want to say something important that you mentioned about me running a book club. It is not free. One of the things that we do that we get to stop doing is educating people for free about stuff they could Google. So no, this book club is not free. It is not a thing that I'm just doing out of the kindness of my heart. Everyone in it is paying me, and I just increased my prices a couple days ago. So
I love that because I definitely charge for the diversity workshop too. I am not above making money off of white people, okay? If you want me to do the emotional labor of teaching you, you are going to pay me for that emotional labor. And that is some real stuff. Thank you.
Yes.
Here for it.
Yes. So I just wanted to make sure that that was clear. I'm not donating emotional labor to the world. No, I did a webinar last month called What the Heck Do I Do, for all the entrepreneurs that were like, what do I do? I just found out that racism was still a thing. I had no idea, right? And so that's what I called it. What the heck do I do? That is not free, but it is available for purchase on replay if you know somebody who needs to see it. It was a great conversation that we got to have, and the book club came out of that. So I've been doing that for the last 30 days with a group of women who are courageously confronting the poison in their systems, and they are detoxifying their souls. We're doing it together, and it's beautiful. And we're starting our next round of it on Monday. So like I said, if you know anybody that needs to join, holler at me, hit me up. It is open to any white women or non-Black women of color that are ready to detoxify their souls from the poison of white supremacy that is harming people of color, especially Black people, every single day. So yeah, no free emotional labor. I just want to reiterate what you said, Tamika. We're not doing emotional labor for free. Google it if you don't know. The Google knows all the things, okay? If Google knows your DNA, like your DNA sequence practically, I guarantee you it knows the things about racism that you need to educate yourself about. So definitely Google it or pay me. I'll be happy to support you. In terms of the actual question that you asked us, Kimberly, you said, what do we do to move forward? I would say one of the things that Tamika talked about that I think is really powerful is to truly become even more unapologetic in our Blackness. Like, now that the world, and by the world I really mean mostly white people, have begun to recognize, right, that we are wielders of melanated magic and we are people who will not be silenced, right? Then we need to be louder. If there are people that are giving us stages and microphones that we haven't had previously, then we need to be as loud as we possibly can and as Black as we possibly can. And so I think that there is so much power in saying, this is our moment. We are center stage. Like, let's turn on all the floodlights and let's show up and shine. And also really taking a moment to check in with ourselves and say, like, where is my place in the revolution? Am I standing firmly in that place, or is there something more that I can be doing to really amplify my own anti-racism work? Because all of us are doing anti-racism work in some way. Like, our very existence is revolutionary, right? Like, we stand on the shoulders of those who came before us, and we get to be everything that they supported us in becoming and created and built a foundation for us to become. And so if you're a mom, like, your anti-racism work is mothering, right? Mothering your children and teaching them that still they rise, right? If you are working in an institution full of Caucasian people of other persuasions, right, then your anti-racism work is showing up and wearing your hoops and your fro and your braids and all of the things, and not code switching, and giving people the opportunity to get comfortable with who you really are. And maybe it looks like, you know what I'm saying, what are you writing on your blog? Maybe it looks like, if you're a singer, what are you singing this week, right? Like, what does it look like for you? And so I truly believe this is really the case for everybody, but like, using your gifts, like, in what way can you make it sustainable? Like, whatever it is that you're doing, like, the revolution has to be sustainable. If you even think about, right, when the Montgomery bus boycott. The bus boycott wasn't a month long. The bus boycott was a year long. It was like 13 months long. And so it wasn't like this month we're mad and now we're tired. So we're gonna stop, or they're not listening anymore, or with the initial shock or whatever has worn off. It was a year of everybody walking to work and biking and carpooling and all the things. Like, they stuck with it and they sustained it for so long that the bus drivers at the bus company did not have any other choice but to say, we've lost so much money, we're going to have to make a change, right? So, like, what does it look like for your revolutionary work to be sustainable? Does it look like you volunteering with an organization that is for the empowerment and upliftment of our people? Does it look like you donating to organizations or encouraging the other people in your life to donate to organizations, right? Because the revolution must be funded in every area and aspect of society. Does it look like, you know, you in your business, like, who are you supporting? Who are you working with? Who are you coaching? Who are your clients? Who are your collaborators? What does it look like for you to be working toward the furtherment of the revolution in that area? And so for me, right, it kind of looks like two things, right? So, like, in my coaching, right, the purpose, the true, my why, right? We always talk about that in business. What's your why? What's the deepest purpose for why you do what you do? And for me, it is the upliftment of my people. It is the reversal of statistics about our suffering. And I do that by empowering women of color to succeed internally so they can succeed externally, right? So I deal with mindset, relationship with yourself, with God, and with other people, and with money, because if you can get all of those things right, you can create anything in your life. And so I support our women in our community, women of color in that area, but I also support white people, because guess what? Guess what, right? The revolution must be funded, and I will accept that funding from any direction, right? So, like, you know what I'm saying? And also, by supporting white women and confronting and detoxifying their souls, I am now creating a group of white women that can go out into their communities and they can help other white people that they know to detoxify their souls. And oh my goodness, how much work can we do to dismantle the system of racism and white supremacy in this country and around the world? Because I got international people, y'all. I'm international, okay? I got people in the Netherlands, people in Australia. Like, I'm changing the freaking world, okay? So that's what it looks like for me. Because this work that I'm currently doing is my gifting. So what does it look like for you to sustainably use your gifting and your own personal passion and your specific purpose and what God puts you here to do? In what way can you use that to further the cause of the revolution so that our future generations can stand on our shoulders and be our wildest dreams? So that's what I would say about that.
I think for me, it's not stopping, right? Because that is a tendency of people our age, is the next new thing. I don't feel like that is this time, because I feel like we've been doing a good job of keeping it going. And so I think, of continuing, like, don't let stuff die down. Like, no matter what your place is, like Jessica was saying, no matter what you're doing, if you're protesting, if you're funding it, no matter what you're doing, don't let it die down. And I like what Tamika was saying of showing up, unapologetically who you are. Like, let people be uncomfortable with that, because that's a reflection of them. It's not a reflection of you. Be comfortable in your Blackness and in my Spanishness. Like, you're going to get all this and deal with it. But for me personally, what I do is I try my hardest to spend my money with Black people. And so my hairdresser is a Black woman. My nail person is a Black lady. The person who runs my social media for my podcast is a Black woman. So I spend my money with Black people and Black communities and uplift Black businesses, because that's what's important to me. Now, I'm also like Jessica, I'm not going to say no to some white dollars, but I think where we spend our money, because this is a very capitalistic country, money talks. And so the minute that bigger, especially white organizations, start to feel the impact on their bottom line, is the sooner that they will start pressing for change. And I don't think that change comes from us, because I think until white people demand it, that's when things will change. We unfortunately, in my opinion, don't have the power to change the things in this country, because the country is not set up for us, right? it's systematically, we're not supposed to be able to change things. So we need our white allies to demand change. And they have to be the ones continuously marching with us, continuously protesting in order for that change to happen. Because we've been saying this forever. I mean, George Floyd wasn't the first one, and he won't be the last one. But, things changed because finally white people woke up and was like, this is not right. And so we need them to continue to do that work. But at the same time, like, this is all the work that you're doing by building Black businesses and businesses of people of color. By spending that money, we are allowing future generations to have the economic future that white people have always had. Like, to give them means to move up, to look for a different life, and to see what that is, because money provides that in this country. That is one of the biggest ways we can change this country. I mean, you talk about things like Black Wall Street. The reason why that was destroyed was because white people were jealous. Like, I read a whole podcast. I listened to a whole podcast about it. Like, that community was wealthier than the white community on the other side of the tracks, and them white people did not like that. It was why they burned it down. And the minute that desegregation happened and Black people and people of color were allowed to spend money outside of Black-owned businesses, was one of the ways that culturally we were put back. Like, economically we were put back because we could spend our money elsewhere. Now, I'm not going to be all the way on my high horse because I love Amazon, but like, do it where you can. Like, so like I said, I get my hair done. She's a Black woman. I get my nails done. That's a Black woman. I purposefully reach out and look to work with other Black people and people of color, because I know that my dollar spent with them is going to do more to uplift a family and a community than if I spend it at a white-owned establishment. So that's my biggest thing. Like, capitalism, money talks. And so the way you choose to spend your money will speak volumes about what you're trying to accomplish.
I love it. You ladies have really rocked this show today. You gave us so much just perspectives to really take a look at as people of color and as white America. I love it, And so just to put my 2 cents in the space, this has really, I'm older than the 3 ladies that's here. So I'm in my 50s. And even in my 50s, I never thought I would see where we are today. This has been an awakening. Really, it has. Because I can be honest with you, as a woman in my 50s, I've seen so much of this, and I've experienced so much of it that, we were just dead inside to all the things that had happened over the years, and have felt this level of acceptance. But just being in the midst of all this has been an awakening for a lot of us, and I love it. I feel electric. I feel so electric that I am seriously thinking about going back to school to get my law degree to work on the Equal Justice Initiative, because I'm so fired up about that. And so you see me, I'll post stories from the Equal Justice Initiative on my page, and I'm just finding ways to volunteer and to really, really work with them, because I'm really fired up. I want to do my little piece of the part too. And I think if we all look at what is our little piece of the part, and Tamika and Jessica and Sasha has given you great advice on how to do that. Look at your piece and what you can do. Think about your gifts. How can you contribute? Be unapologetically in your Blackness, or as people of color, as Hispanics, or whatever it is. Be unapologetic at this point. Don't let people feel like you need to apologize. Keep the conversation going. Don't stop. Don't let them sit with it and be okay with it. Be cognizant of where you spend your money. I love all of this. All of this was so good. Ooh, ladies, thank you for blessing me for my 2nd anniversary of the podcast. I really appreciate you. And so we'll see you next time. And I hope you enjoyed it. Put your comments below. Goodbye.